So I'm going to go back to the introduction I gave Sally at our first ever session 2 years ago. So welcome everybody. Allow me to introduce for the last time my awesome friend Sally OJ. Here is how I introduced her 2 years ago. Sally Orson-Jones, also known professionally as Sally OJ, is a literary editor and writer's mentor based in Brighton in the UK. She started her career at the BBC and then worked for many years in the music business, working for bands, record companies, and MTV. During this time, Sally was one of the first readers of Sarah Waters' then unpublished novel, Tipping the Velvet. And Sally has gone on to collaborate with Sarah on all of her books, a relationship which continues to this day. Since becoming a book doctor in 1998, she has worked with authors ranging from absolute beginners at one end of the spectrum to Viv Albertine and other successful, on both of her successful autobiographies at the other. She loves it all. Just to add to this, now this is in real time, just to add to this, Sal, I mentioned a couple of kind of well-known writers or well-known people that you've worked with, but even this year alone, you've had there are three published books, I think, that you've worked on.
Yeah, so far.
It's a busy time. Right, Sal, let's cut straight into it. How on earth did you get into the world of a literary editor?
Well, I've told this story before. I've told the story to you before. It was a complete accident. And one of the things I always say is what happened to me, it makes me think that everybody is walking around with something that they're really good at and they just don't know it. And I had no idea that I could do this. I was working as a sort of features editor in the music business, and I knew Sarah socially. I didn't know her that well, but you know, well enough. And she mentioned to me at some point that she was writing a novel, and I was very encouraging. And I think I always say this, I'm not certain that everyone was. You know, you guys all know this. You tell people you're writing a book and people go, oh, really? And I think she was very happy to have somebody say, oh, I think that's fantastic. What a brilliant idea. And after a while, she asked me if I would look at something she'd written for this book. And I was horrified, because nobody wants to look at their friends' creative stuff, do they? But I also thought I really want to be encouraging and I really want to be supportive. So I said, yeah, of course. And she gave me the sheaf of papers, which I put off reading for a few days because I really was sort of anxious about it. And I will never forget sitting down at my kitchen table to starting reading, getting up with the sheaf of papers in my hands and going into the other room and saying to my partner, this book that Sarah's writing is really very, very good. And you know, they were the first pages of Tipping the Velvet, more or less, as they are. But really, I mean, imagine that. Imagine starting to read that.
Yeah. Wow.
So what happened was we started, I'm sorry if this is verbatim, I do tell this story a lot, and I should learn to sort of change it up a bit, but we started meeting up, you know, every now and then. She'd give me some more and we'd meet and talk about it. And what happened was, before very long, we'd sort of settle into a pattern where I said, I just loved it, it was fantastic. I mean, what was I going to say? But I'd say things like, you know, I'm not really sure what happened there. It sort of wasn't really clear there. And, you know, did they really have sort of motorcycles in 1843? And, you know, of course she didn't do anything like that. I was spotting anachronisms is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And I'd say things like, you know, there was, you know, that girl who was sewing, what happened to her? She just sort of disappeared. And at a certain point, Sarah said something to me like, you know, I've been showing this to other people, but no one else has noticed this kind of stuff. And I thought, they haven't. And as I always say to people, what happened was Sarah realized that she could write exceptionally good books. And I learned that I had a real knack for, I don't think I could really have called it editing then. I mean, this was, you know, over 25 years ago now. But I was good at something. And I only worked with Sarah up until Fingersmith, which is dedicated to me, by the way. Can't say Fingersmith without adding that. I only worked with Sarah, and it was a very loose, and not loose because we were very committed to each other, but I mean, it was a very, I wouldn't have called myself an editor, and I still have my day job, but
up until that point, Sal, that was really something you hadn't realized, and that kind of attention to detail when you're reading. I mean, did you find yourself doing that with books you were reading?
I don't know. I mean, I think I must have done, but it only really happened when people started to say to Sarah, you know, would you read my book? And of course she couldn't, because she was very, very busy by this point. But she started saying, oh, I know someone who could. And she'd say to me, you know, can I recommend you this person? And I said, God, no, of course not. I haven't had any training. I can't I can't ask for money to do this. But what happened was, because I enjoyed it so much, I didn't ask for money for a long time, but I started to learn my trade. So I started to learn that instead of saying, you know, I think you could make this a bit more better in this bit, I started to say, you know, you're telling rather than showing. I started to learn what I was talking about, and became much more confident, and gradually did start charging people, which felt very audacious when I first started doing it. But I also started working for an organization called the Literary Consultancy, who I think Sarah also recommended me to as a reader. And that was very, very encouraging for me, because they really take very good people, and me. And the fact that they had, you know, they believed that I was the right person to be one of their readers. And you know, it's been a consistently extremely happy relationship since I started, and that was over 20 years ago, I think now, that I've been reading for TLC, and that really boosted my confidence and made me think, well, actually, this is obviously something I can do. But I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think, I would never have known I could do this. I would never ever have known. And I feel really strongly that everyone has got some kind of, you know, whether it's, you know, wood carving or you know, whatever it is, everyone's got something that's just waiting to be sort of touched. And
so just
very lucky.
Pause 1 second, Sal. Sorry, someone's just asking about Q&A. Yeah, please do add your questions. If you click on Q&A in the bottom menu bar at the bottom of your screen, it'll open a separate box, and you can add your question there. That's the best place to do it. Feel free to post your question at any point. We may not answer it straight away, but we will get to it during this session. So what we normally, you know, we will start answering questions in the next few minutes, I'm sure. Sal, sorry, I just wanted to make the point.
Absolutely fine.
One of my memories, so I met you about 15 years ago now. We both worked for the same organization. You were doing some editing kind of as a side job, but I just remember your attention. I mean, you were doing a lot of proofreading and editing of the kind of training materials we were producing. In fact, anything. I remember giving you, you know, pitch documents and proposals before I sent them out. You would always look through them. But I also remember you spending lunchtimes looking up, you know, or trying to research whether they had, like you say, motorcycles in 90, you know. So I remember those times. So I want to get to the crux of the matter, which is 25 years on. Right, and having worked with hundreds of authors on across the entire spectrum, and you've talked to me about this a lot, about your passionate kind of belief that an editor can make the difference between, you know, years spent laboring over a manuscript of love, but actually getting that into the right hands and getting that into shape and getting it published.
I believe with all my heart that so many fantastic books have fallen at the last fence, which is getting an agent, because they have not been edited. You know, there isn't a published book that hasn't had not just one editor work on it, but 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
You know, there's, you know, if you're you know, you should have somebody look at it before you even try and get an agent. The agent will work often in an editing capacity, and then once you get a publisher, then you get your editors. You get a lot of editors once you get a publisher.
Yeah.
So I so strongly believe that some wonderful books have been lost forever because they just weren't submitted to the editing process before they went out. And it is so important to do this. Not everyone can afford me, but there are hundreds and hundreds of excellent editors out there. There are companies like the Literary Consultancy, there's quite a few of them, because it could just be one thing that's stopping it. It could just be one thing. It could be, you know, I've talked about working on converted fan fiction before. You know, your characterization, everything might be perfect, but the agent might think, oh, his characterization's awful.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. It's done. It's finished. That's it. But if it comes to an editor, they will say to you, why everything else is so good? Why is your characterization so bad? And you will talk about it, and you'll get to the bottom of it, and you'll work it out, and you know, you'll come back with a second draft, and you've
talked quite a lot about that in some of our sessions around that working it out, that important part of the process where you're actually
an important part.
You have a relationship with the writer, and that has to work, but then it's about sitting down and working through problems together.
Absolutely. Brainstorming, working it out. Yeah. You know, I spend a lot of my time saying, what did you actually want to say here? What are you actually saying here? And the author will tell me, and I'll say, oh, okay, so we just need to redo this bit then, because that's not coming across at all. And especially, of course, your first 3 chapters. If nothing else, make sure an editor looks at your first 3 chapters. But then, of course, because that's what agents want to see, is your first 3 chapters. But if you get your first 3 chapters shining, and they think, oh, this is fantastic, let's see the whole manuscript, and then the rest is a shambles one way or another, and that sounds really harsh, but it can be shambolic, because if characterization isn't right, if you are telling not showing, if your pacing, huge thing, isn't quite right, that'll be it. They'll go, oh, it looked great, but it isn't. Bye. That's it. And
I find it. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, an editor will catch all this stuff. And I'm telling you, 7 times out of 10, the author will just go, oh, and fix it, because they've never had anyone say this to them.
Yes.
Really, that often they will fix it. Now, nothing is a guarantee. I'm not saying if you get an editor that you will then get an agent and you will then get a publisher. Of course not. There are so many variables. I mean, we did a session a while ago on agents, and you know, there are so many different variables. But it will certainly give your book a much better chance. And why not? Yeah. And you know, one of the things I always say to people at the beginning of a process, I say, I can't promise you an agent, I can't promise you publication, but I can promise you that we can make your book as good as it can be. Yeah. And you will have at the end of this process a book that you are so proud of, that you can show your family and friends, and they will go, oh my God, I had no idea that you could write something like this. And
I bet that gives you some real kind of tingling moments, doesn't it?
Oh, you know, I've learned so many times, you know, so many times I've read the first draft of a book and thought, now how am I going to how am I going to break this
I'm going to break
to
the
them?
news. Yeah.
And they've just stunned me, you know, and I rarely have no, that's not true. I do sometimes have very difficult conversations with people, but I always try and be sort of kind and but it's hard, you know, it's your baby. So if somebody's telling you your baby is ugly, you know, that's not good. But over and over and over again, people come back to me with a second draft and I am stunned. And some of those books have been published. And you know, one of the books that I've got very high hopes for at the moment, somebody who's just got an agent, there was one section in this book that she just could not get right. And she kept sending it back to me and I kept saying, no. And we tried to work out why and tried to fix it. And she was ready to, you know, come around my house and you know, beat me up, I think, at some point. And she was beside herself and I was getting very frustrated, but we cracked it. And she got an agent very quickly. And the agent said, I've never had to not suggest work on a book before.
Oh, really?
I'm not suggesting any work on this. And I mean, that was, you know, part of that was me. A great deal of that was her, obviously.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes it's worth getting, because especially these days, if an agent thinks this is good, but it's going to be a lot of work. And we talked about agents don't have time anymore. It used to be completely different. It used to be a big part of an agent's job was to basically be an editor, but it's not anymore. They will push people towards someone like me, and it is just, well, I'm just repeating myself now. It's just so worth it. Excuse me. Turn my heating down.
Yeah, yeah, sure. One of the reasons I love these sessions, I have total admiration for what you do, but I'm also incredibly kind of jealous in a way that you just have that ability. I do consider it a superpower. It's like you've discovered your superpower. But the number of times I read things, I go, there's not something I don't quite enjoy about this, but I couldn't tell you what. And you have that kind of, that analytical eye that is able to do that. But I love the stories you have of working with the writers you do.
I do now have that ability.
I can imagine it's a craft you have to hone,
when I started, it was very much me saying, I don't know, this isn't working, but I don't know why.
I don't know why, yeah. That's
I mean, there was one book that did later see the light of day where I had to say to the author, no, I didn't have to. It makes it sound, you know, what I never want to sound like is I'm some sort of godlike figure. We had a discussion. We were talking to each other on a mutual footing. And I said, I think you've just got to start again. And this wasn't the first draft. It wasn't even the second draft. And it just wasn't working. And I said, I really do just think you're just going to have to start again. And they were not happy. and I think they even said something like, well, no one else has said that. And I was sure enough to say, I think people want to say that and they just don't.
So you've got to be prepared to have difficult conversations. So I'm going to pause you there because there's tons of questions coming in. And I'd really like to get into some. And there's quite a few that I think we can kind of group together. So Cal Writer 2 starts with a really good one, which is basically talking, you know, when you're ready to hire an editor, how can an indie author tell whether the editor is a good one? Almost anyone can call herself an editor, and they're not as good as you are. What should we ask a prospective editor? So what do we look?
What I do, I mean, it is really difficult, and people do. I mean, you know, I've had authors that I've worked with who have not been able to write, set themselves up as editors, which incensed me because, you know, I didn't have any training, but I made sure I got it when I knew I was going to do it seriously. So there's several things. One is look at the testimonials. Now, of course, I could sit here all day writing my own testimonials, but you want ones, you know, if they've got ones from published authors, always helpful. But what I always do is have an initial conversation with somebody. Not that I charge for, just an initial conversation, which can be an hour or so, where we just sort of feel each other out. And, you know, sometimes I say to them, you know, I am not the right person for this book. I am just not the right person for this book. But I'll always recommend somebody who I think will be. I often send people to the literary consultancy, actually.
But a lot of editors won't necessarily be that honest, because particularly if you're starting out, you want to just get the work, don't you? You want to, and so they may not be. So,
you know, I've also had authors say to me, you know, this has been lovely talking to you. I'm going to think about this. And then I get an email a few days later saying, I'm sorry, I just don't think we're the right fit. It's like a therapist, or it's like
so there has to be a fit. There has to be almost a chemistry, and almost like a so actually, as a writer, as an author, you should be pushing to have that initial call with an editor to feel them out. Yeah.
And of course, the other thing, I mean, especially in the last few years or so, is word of mouth. You know, authors that, you know, I find on that.
That's exactly what Sandra just said. Recommendations from other authors. Yeah.
Oh, good on you, Sandra. But yes, I mean, word of mouth. I find on Twitter, you know, people talk about me quite a lot, and there's a Facebook page for published authors that's closed. It's a closed book. Freudian slip. It's a closed group, and I get a lot of work from there, because one person has said, "Oh, Sally's good," and then
so go and find your groups and
but I mean, I've got no control over that. That just happens. But I think basically, if you're a sort of charlatan, people are going to find out very quickly.
Well, you'd hope so, but you know that's not always the case. But there also, and Deanne makes this point, there are many types of editors, so development editors, line editors. Where do you start? Which one do you start with as a new author?
Well, I would love it if everyone got their book subbed before they sent it to me. I would love that.
Right.
And I work quite closely with one particular.
So by saying subbed, Sal, you mean a sub-editor, or is that also a line editor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's making sure your punctuation's clean, your layout is correct, you know, there are no typos, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times I say on my website, please make sure you send me a clean manuscript. I mean, most people do, but some people don't. A few times I've had to send manuscripts back to people and say, please fix this, and then I'll look at it, because that's just a waste of everyone's time. And also it makes me cross, and you do not want me cross when I'm reading your book. You want me happy when I'm reading your book. But I will quite often say, we'll do very well together. And I'll say, before you send this to an agent now, you must get it subbed. You must definitely get it subbed. And, you know, I can always recommend people, but again, you can find people online, but it is hard. It is difficult. But if you look online, there are ones that the cream always rises to the top. It's true. So you'll see organizations like the Literary Consultancy, they are the best out there, and you'll see that, and it's their commitment to the writer that makes them the best out there. And you know, there are, I don't know, in this country 20 or so editors like me that are consistently mentioned, consistently recommended, consistently rise to the top. And you know, I sometimes have conversations with people telling me it's a lot of money. I can take 3 weeks on a book. I sometimes don't even make the living wage. It's a lot of money for you, the author. I recognize that, but it's so worth it. It is so worth it. And you know, there are people cheaper than me. There are people more expensive than me, but there are certainly people cheaper than me. But you know, you get what you pay for. You really do.
Okay, and I'm just going to go back to the point you've made, and a few others in chat have made about, you know, talking to groups and finding recommendations, and also just I remember this coming into, you know, I'm not a writer, but I've worked within this kind of field remember coming with all finding out first about, you know, I didn't for years understand the difference between a line editor and all the different kind of categories. But if you're in a community, if you have a group, you know, of like-minded fellow authors, that's a place where you will learn. And
I mean, I think if you, yes, exactly that. If you join some kind of writing community and say, can anyone recommend a good, it's like asking for a good plumber. You know, can anyone, you'll see the same name comes up. Literally, if you ask for a good plumber, you'll get loads of names, but you'll see that the same one or two come up over and over again.
Go on, sorry.
I'll fix your pipes.
And while we're on the subject, so is it worth looking for, so Maureen asked us about looking for a genre specific editor, or is a good editor and can address equally well an array of genres?
I suppose if there is a genre specific editor, I would.
Well, there are things, what things wouldn't you touch, Sal? So which, you know, what?
Not exactly that I wouldn't touch, is that I can't do them.
Yeah, okay.
So but in the conversation, I mean, often in the initial approach, someone will say, I've got this children's book, and I'll say, I'm so sorry, I can tell you someone who can. Yeah. But I can't do. So I can't do children's or young adults. And it's not, I've said this before, I'm the person who would say, we're going on a bear hunt. I'd say, what a load of old rubbish, you know, I'm not going to like it. You know, what do I know about, I know what my child liked, but I just cannot do that genre. I can't do horror because I dislike horror, and I can't do it. And I can't do sci-fi because I just don't understand the tropes. I really don't understand the tropes of sci-fi. I can do fantasy, which is different, but I can be reading a sci-fi book and think that's ridiculous, and then it turns out, you know, it's actually brilliant, and I just don't know. So I learned very early that I couldn't do sci-fi. But of course we'll have that conversation. If somebody, we don't usually get that far, because if somebody says in their initial email, I've written this great young adult book, I'll say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you, but I can tell you someone who can.
Yeah, excellent.
Because what's the point for either of us if I try and take on something that I can't do?
Let's move on. There's a couple of questions here that relate to I'd imagine something you come across a fair amount, which is writing what can be described as an epic, you know, so a very, very large story, manuscript. And I think it'd be good to get into these in a little bit. So one, YG Garcia. So I'm self-publishing a 220,000 word epic family saga that is a novelization of a TV genre. It's difficult to edit, yet my beta readers love it. Still, my intention is to create readers out of TV viewers. Would it be a good idea to release my novel as a trilogy and then the full deluxe version, deluxe edition later, or should I just publish the full story?
Now, this is a very difficult question for me to answer, because I haven't seen any of the book, I haven't got a clue. So I'm just going to assume it's brilliant. But what you have to think of, and you know, if we did one of those word clouds of the things I've said most in the last 2 years, think of your reader.
Yeah.
And not only that, but think of you if you're self-publishing, it's different, I suppose. But it's difficult. It's very, very difficult to self-publish. Now, if you've got a background in marketing or in publishing, it's much easier. Not in publishing, in marketing or PR. It's much in publishing, you're laughing. It's much easier, but it's very difficult because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books are self-published every day. If you don't know the algorithms, if you don't know the right keywords to put in, if you don't know how to play that game, people just aren't going to see it. And if they do Google epic whatever, there's going to be thousands of them. Literally thousands. So it's really hard. Some people do it brilliantly. Some people do know all that and they do it well. So that's the first thing. You've got to, you know, I'm always saying to people, who's your reader? Who are you aiming this at? And they say, oh, everybody, everyone. No, you've really got to be like a laser and think, who do I want to read this book? who is going to want to read this book, and you've got to point it right at them. And then if you're lucky, it will open up. So one of the hardest bits of my job, and here I'm not talking about this author who asked the question, I mean, or I could be, I don't know. Like I said, I'm just making the assumption that the book is great. Books are great. But one of the hardest conversations I have to have with authors is when they start, you know, I say things like, you know, you need to fix this or you need to address that. And they say, oh, you know, when it's a film, it'll be fine. And it's, you know, it could be true. But the point is, keep your expectations realistic, because the book will be better for it. If you start with this assumption that it's going to be picked up, there's going to be a fight for it, there's going to be, you know, different Hollywood people and different TV people are going to be fighting for it, it's going to, you are not focusing on the book that you're writing, and you have to focus on the book that you're writing. And if you come in with this, and it happens all the time, it's natural. I'm not knocking it, but what I'm saying is you've got to talk yourself out of that, and you've got to remember you're one very small book in an ocean. You're a herring in the Atlantic Ocean, is what you are. And you know, if you're very, very lucky, you're going to come up on somebody's hook, however good your book is. I just made that up. It's not bad, is it? So you've really got to keep your expectations realistic. The first thing, it's different of course if you're self-publishing, but the first thing normally you've got to just focus on getting an agent. That's it. That's the first thing you've got to focus on. If you're self-publishing, you've got to focus on very clearly who you want your reader to be, on how you're going to get to them, on things like, you know, people do judge books by their cover. They really, really do. I mean, you can, you know, I always say to people, Google chick lit, and you're going to see the same cover if you Google images over and over again, or mystery or thriller. It's, you know by the cover of the book what you're going to get. People do judge a book by its title. So it's great. You might have this really funny, really insightful title. I'm talking about if you're self-publishing now, this really clever title. But if it says, you know, put the tweezers in the pie, you know, that means nothing to anyone. It might be brilliant. It might be so relevant to the book. It might be the perfect title once you've read the book. But the reader has got to see it on Amazon or whatever, and they've got to think, oh yeah, that I know that title. You know, that title's talking to me.
You've
that
got
title
and
that cover are talking to me. I mean, that's just the very beginning of self-publishing. So have big ambitions. Of course, we've all got big ambitions. Have big dreams, but really focus on making the book as good as it can be first.
And linked to another question from A. Ripley. So if you are thinking of self-publishing, so in this person's case, got a very large historical novel. It would run as about 860 pages as a paperback. So thinking that a traditional publisher wouldn't touch it, and thinking of therefore self-publishing, should it be 2 volumes or even forget print and make it an audible book? Is that something you ever advise on?
Audiobooks sell by the bucketful. You know, lots of people love them. If you're thinking about self-publishing, and I'm kicking myself now, and she will kick me, somebody called Orna, I think it's, I mean, I know this woman. I want to say Orla, O-R-L-A Ross. Can you Google this for me, Tom? Orla Ross. And she has got and self-publishing. Because Orna, yes, somebody's telling me. Yeah.
Orna.
Why am I seeing that? That's so bizarre. It's like psychically I'm seeing it. I haven't seen anything else today, and I just see that. Orna Ross, who has got, what's it called, her organization?
Orna Ross is self-publishing advice, is it? Oh no, Alliance of Independent Authors.
Alliance of Independent Authors. She is fantastic.
Yeah.
Everything you need to know about self-publishing, everything you need to know, all the advice, all the help, all the hints. It's just such a great resource. And she's a wonderful person, and she cares about, she won't care about me after this, but she cares about writers so much.
Right.
And she's passionate, and there's nothing she doesn't know about self-publishing.
Interesting.
This is the kind of thing you've got to find. This is the kind of resource you've got to find.
Sal, back to the role of an editor. So this is linked because the person whose book we've just been talking about has said that the book was professionally edited and the editor really liked it, but they made no suggestions as to how they should publish it. Is that normally something?
No, that's not. I mean, I don't do that I do that very, very occasionally, but no, my job is to get the book good. And I will sometimes say, I'll sometimes say, you know, there's an agent called blah. I think they might be, this is sort of up their street, try them. But I don't make any recommendations.
Yeah.
I say this is the kind of thing, because over the years I have got to know quite a few agents. I've got to know what they like, but I never ever get, well, that's a lie. I so rarely in my career have got involved with that, and I don't, you know, it's not a lie really to say that I don't, because it is so incredibly rare. Even if I think a book is fantastic, you know, I say to people, you can use my name and you can say I think it's great, but that my job stops at getting the book, signing the book off, really. And very, very occasionally I will say, try this particular agent or try that particular agent. Sometimes it'll just be because I saw on Twitter that day that they've opened their list, you know, and I'll say, give it a go. But it's not my job to do that. That's, you know, that's going on to the next step. Yeah. And I do have people asking me that a lot, so I'm always very clear right at the beginning that I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
I can't do it because, you see, there's so much to do with, you know, agents think about money, and they think about money, and they think about, you know, money.
Yeah.
And which isn't to say they don't love literature. Of course they do. Naturally they do. They're passionate about it. But they're thinking, as soon as they've got a manuscript in their hands, they're thinking, how can I sell this? Where can I sell this?
Yeah.
You know, can I make this into a TV show? How can I make the most out of this? Because that's how they make their living. They get a percentage. So they're thinking, they're counting all that. They're thinking in terms of the paper weight, literally. You know, am I going to risk printing this big book by this new author, because that's a lot of paper, and if it doesn't sell, those are the kinds of things they're thinking about, and that's what they should be thinking about. And then publishers again. So publishers are probably thinking about paperweight, not agents. There are things that I talk to publishers sometimes, you know, if I'm at some glamorous literary soiree, as of course I often swan along to, and they'll say something, you know, and I'll be stunned, and I'll think, God, I never, you know, I would never have thought of that, because I don't, because I sit here in my little cave and I say, you're telling, not showing again. You know, that's what I do. So it's a whole different world, and it's a world that, of course, I've come to know a lot about. Of course I have, but it is a different world, and it's not my world.
So that's another world that's probably not your world, but I think you'll have an opinion on this, is kind of book marketing. So someone asked, in fact, I think the very first question you had from Lauren, I'm in the midst of writing my novel. Can I start marketing it now? I would have thought you would leave the marketing generally till once it's completed, but I don't know. What's your... Well,
the first question is, do you have marketing experience? Because if you don't, it's again, Lauren, I don't know your book. I don't want to make assumptions. First of all, you could have marketing experience. Second of all, your book could be absolutely fantastic. But I'm going to generalize now. Usually people who have got no marketing experience, it's such a particular skill. It's you know, it's like going back to plumbers, you know, you wouldn't ask a baker to fix your leaky sink. You want to stick with people who know exactly what they're doing. And marketing, again, we're back to the herrings. You know, you can't just wave a herring about and say, look at my herring. You've got, you know, you very close to something not quite right there. But you even if you hire, you know, a plinth in Trafalgar Square and say, look at my book, it's still not, you know, there are very, 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 very specific ways of doing these things. Yeah. So if you're going to market yourself, look at Orna Ross's site. She's got loads of advice. Read books about marketing yourself. Just get as much knowledge as you can, because I promise you'll be amazed. You will think, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And it's also expensive. It's expensive to market yourself.
Just to say, it's a pretty good point to mention this. Sally's mentioned some of the topics that we've covered over the past couple of years. You can find all of those sessions as recordings on our Facebook page. No, sorry, not our Facebook page, our YouTube channel.
And indeed on mine.
And yes, and on Sally's website, sallyoj.com.
I love you, Tom.
Well, I'll post a link to that in a second. But we also, I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of webinar recordings on our YouTube channel. And we do some great sessions with book marketing experts. I can't remember the guy's name that we do them with quite regularly. But if, as Sally says, and I wholeheartedly agree with, you know, you need to have some guidance and help and experience, particularly if you're coming to this without marketing experience. That's a great place to start looking, as is, you know, the community that we've got here tonight.
I mean, Tom,
yeah,
to radically turn the tables, you know, you've got marketing experience. What do you think of somebody who has no marketing experience trying to do that?
Well, yeah, so that's a really interesting question. When I have very specific marketing experience, if I'm ever touching something I've not done before, I always seek advice. So I'll always read around the subject. I'll do research into it, talk to those I know who work in that field, join, you know, there are lots of kind of open channels, open Slack channels and places like that where you can get great advice on these things. And I probably wouldn't touch anything or do anything, activate anything, certainly. I might have ideas because I'm really passionate about, but I also know from experience that the passion you have for something when you've built it is very different to how your customers may be viewing it. And that's the biggest thing about marketing, is what you've said, Sally. You have to constantly think about, who am I aiming this at?
Yeah.
What do they want to see? I've got 3 or 4 seconds to grab their attention, you know, so it doesn't matter how good it's, and it's one of the things that people, it's so easy to be blinded by your own view of something rather than actually taking the view of your reader or your audience.
I mean, yeah, and sorry, I asked you a question and now I'm interrupting you, but you know, one of the first things, well, it's not going to work unless your book looks like a book.
Yeah.
You know, your reader wants to think, oh, this looks good. This looks like a proper book. This looks, you know, it's on good paper. The cover's good. The font is right. I can tell by looking at it what it's going to be. The title makes sense to me. You know, if it's laid out properly, it has been edited, you know, all of it. Because if they open, you know, I had a book once that had been on, she said, it's been on Amazon for 2 years and it hasn't sold at all. And it was just full of typos. And I mean, the first page had 2 typos on it. And it wasn't a bad book at all. But if I'd have looked at it on Amazon, I wouldn't have read past the first page. Yeah. Because, and also, you know, it had a sort of hand-drawn cover. And, you know, it's coming back to craft and skill. Yeah. And you know, if somebody turned up at your door, I can't do it. I can't stretch my mind far enough, but you know, I don't know what, you know. But it's about sticking to your specialism, isn't it? It's kind of, you're good at what you're good at. Presenting yourself professionally is what I was trying to say. I was going to say, if somebody turns up your door dressed you know, as a pantomime horse and says, hello, we're your plumbers, you know, you'd be a bit wary.
I wish I'd kept a list of all the great great.
I'm so glad you haven't. But you know, you have to, if you're going to market your own book, you've got to present yourself as somebody who really knows what they're doing. Ideally, you've got to know what you're doing, but if you're not 100% sure, certainly got to seem as if you are, and the book has got to look like a book, and you don't know what a book that doesn't look like a book looks like until you've seen it, and then you know straight away.
Okay, so I'm slightly worried how we're going to get through all these questions, but a quick one. Barb, you asked about our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and look up ProWritingAid, it will come up with our channel there. It's a free channel. Just go along and take a look.
Tom, for what it's worth, and it's our last session, I'm not really in any hurry. So if you want to go over a bit, I'm comfortable with that if you can.
Great, absolutely, no problem at all. All right, but let's try and fly through some of these because there are some really interesting ones here. And apologies for those of you who've been waiting a long time for an answer. So, Elizabeth, I'm wondering if fiction can include prescriptive type of subject matter like self-help, socio-emotional stuff to enlighten the reader. Can you think of anything like that?
I'm so sorry, but can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm wondering if fiction can include prescriptive type of subject matter like self-help or socio-emotional stuff to enlighten the reader. Can you think of anything like that?
Yes, of course it can, and often does, but it's think of your reader. The first thing you want to do with the book is entertain. You want your reader to start reading and think, oh, I wonder what happens next. And then you want them to, you know, when somebody's shouting at you to lay the table, you want to be saying just a couple more pages. And then you want to be falling asleep at night and thinking, just finish this chapter. Oh, or just one more chapter. That's what you want people to think about with your book. You don't want them to think, I'm learning something. Now, it's fantastic if they are learning something, if they are finding out about something. And there are thousands of novels that do that and do it brilliantly. But the first thing you want is to entertain your reader, is to get them hooked and keep them hooked. So, and the trouble with books like what you're talking about is they can be very full of information dumps, and you certainly don't want information dumps. They can also be very full of sort of exposition, which is when you've got two characters telling each other something that they know, because you want the reader to know it. So, you know, I always use this example like, hi, George, you're my brother-in-law. I haven't seen you for 3 weeks since we went to the films together. And you know, our relationship was a bit dodgy at first, but we get on great now. You know, how are you? You know, he knows all that. So exposition is a problem, and information dumps is a big problem. But certainly it can be done, and it can be done really well, and readers can, you know, what you also want is your reader to finish the book and go, wow, I really learned something. And that's fantastic. And I've done that so often. We all have, haven't we? So absolutely, it can certainly be done.
Holger comes up with a good suggestion. Try Last Man Standing by David Baldacci. Yeah, absolutely. Includes a decent amount of material on trauma counselling material without drifting into being a self-help book. Thank you, Holger, as usual, for your contributions. I'm on the third draft of a historical novel set in Europe's Belle Epoque era with a parallel contemporary plot in the US Midwest. Its themes are harmonic, but it only has a few plot touch points. Need I create more to make it tighten the weave?
This is something that I simply can't answer because I can't see the book. I think if you're asked, this is the truth. I think if you're asking the question, then probably yes. It sounds very, very ambitious. If you pull it off, it's going to be great. There's no reason you shouldn't pull it off. But this is the kind of thing you need an editor to tell you.
Yeah.
Get your first draft down, get your second draft down, and then send it to an editor. And you might want to just say to them, would you please just look at structure? That's all I want you to look at, is just the structure. Does the structure work? But please do that, because what a waste of a fantastic idea if it somehow isn't working.
Yeah.
You know, and I do see this a lot. And again, not talking about this book, of course not, I haven't seen it, but I do see a lot that people have had a fantastic idea, and often a very complex idea, but the story is almost nothing. And it's the story that your readers want.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I don't mean to cut you off. I
had to stop there.
There are a few questions coming in about Sally's site, so I've put a link in the chat for that. There's a question, a quick one, about literary consultancy, Sal. Someone asks whether a manuscript assessment is the same as a development edit. Do you know that? Does that sound right to you?
I'm not sure what to see. I'm a charlatan. I'm not sure what a development edit is. I think it is the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
If I have to guess.
But it would probably...
Literary consultancy are fantastic, but the difference with the literary consultancy and people like me is you will get a report. They take a tremendous amount of time to fit you with the right reader. They really do. And their first goal is the care of the author. But what you as the author will never have any contact with your reader. They'll find you the right reader. The reader will write you an excellent report. All the TLC readers are extremely good. Okay. But that's it. There's no contact. I think sometimes when I've done a report for TLC and people have had a question or two and they come back, that's fine. But TLC broker all the communication that you're not allowed. My contract says I can't communicate directly.
Got it.
With the authors. So and that's to protect everyone, I think. Yeah. So what you'll get is an extremely high quality service, but there's no talking to the reader.
Direct
contact.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Sal. Okay, Zafaril asks, I've gone through one round of professional editing of my 105,000 word manuscript after doing a couple of pro writing edits as well, and 3 rounds of self-editing. With all the emphasis on show versus tell these days, I did not get a single comment in the edited copy about certain section which I thought were clear examples of tell in the manuscript. Right, so okay, so almost kind of...
So first question, was this a professional editor that you went to? Right. Just yes or no?
Okay, so we'll look out for that answer.
Let's assume that they were. What they should have told you is this book is too long and you need to cut it. Agents are not going to look at anything over 100,000. They're not. And there's not from a new author. I always say there's sometimes genre, historical novels, just fantasy novels, just. But if it's a new author, they're not going to take that risk. They're not going to print up however many thousand of a new book by a new author that big that might just sit on, go to the remainder bins in 2 months. They're not going to do it. You've got to get it under 100,000. That's the first thing that your editor should have told you. Never mind worrying about show, don't tell. So do that. Bring it down. Okay. Bring it down. It's hard to do, and that's the other thing the editor should have been helping you to do, is helping you to cut. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what country you're in. But it's true. I think.
Okay. You are. Thanks, Sal. Okay, I'm writing an epic fantasy that will use telepathy. Should I use italics to indicate telepathic dialogue, or some form of tag such as an asterisk or in brackets? I
would always say italics are your friend, as long as it's consistent. The other thing about italics, though, is you use them for other things. So, you know, an asterisk, as long as it's crystal clear, or brackets, or dashes, or, you know, but it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be absolutely clear. And although I would always say go for italics, it's also true that you can't use italics to emphasize something, or for lyrics, or a foreign language, or anything else that people often use italics for. But consistency and clarity, that's what you want to look for.
Yeah. Okay. So this is get back to the editing process. How much say do you as the author have in the editing process when working with a publisher's editor?
I'm so sorry, one more time.
So that's okay. How much say do you have as the author? How much say do you have as the author in the editing process when working with a publisher's editor?
More than you think. And this is the thing that I think, you know, I've had authors who've got publishing deals, or even got agents, and they're so relieved and so happy that they've got, first of all, an agent and then a publisher, that if the agent says, you know, I love this book about a three-legged man, but I think you need to lose a three-legged man, they do it, because you've got much more agency than you think. You know, I perhaps shouldn't. One of the authors that's had a book come out this year is an extremely, she's an extraordinary person. And, you know, her agents and publishers are saying, you know, we should think this will be a great cover. And she said, absolutely, under no circumstances is that going to be the cover of my book. Now, she will let herself be guided, of course, because if you're smart, you listen to the people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But do not let them lose your three-legged man, if that's the whole point of your book. You know, do not let them make you cut. If they say you've got to cut, then they're right, you've got to cut. But you've got much more agency than you think. At least debate with them. They might change your mind. They might say, no, this is why. But you might change their mind as well. If you say, no, look, this is, you know, this is the whole reason I wrote the book. So they don't want somebody to be difficult. They don't want somebody to be a pain. They don't want to write in the margins of your manuscript, do not work with them on another book, you know, but you have, you know, everyone wants it to be successful. They need you as much as you need them, in a way, you know, if they want to make it a success. And they don't want arrogance, and they don't want arsiness, but they will listen. If you fight your corner, they will at least listen. And you should fight your corner if it's important. Yeah.
So this is great. So we've got 3 more questions we're going to get through. I think they're all quite brief, but important. First is Teresa asks, what if the story crosses multiple genres? How do you narrow it down to target the best audience?
This is problematic, especially these days, because the first thing an agent is going to think is where are Waterstone's going to put this in this country, where is Smith's going to put this, which is a shop that also sells pens and headphones and, you know, stationery and stuff. Where even is a supermarket going to put this book? They want to say, you know, this is a tin of tomatoes, here you are. You want tomatoes, here's your tin of tomatoes. So they are really going to care about genre in a way that I find depressing, actually. But that's my problem. So what you've got to do is, you know, I just worked on a book which she very accurately described as historical magic realism. Now, everyone knows what that is. An agent understands what that is. It's historical and it's got a bit of spooky stuff in it. But you've got to, even if it does straddle 4 or 5 genres, you've got to, as you present it in your covering letter, in your synopsis, it's got to, I would say, stick to 2, the 2 that best represent it. And if you can't do that, you might have a problem, to be honest, because it you know, readers as well want to feel comfortable. They want to know what they're reading. There are always exceptions to this. Of course there are. And that's the trouble, because an author can always say to me, but look at this, but look at that, you know, but look at James Joyce. Well, yes, of course. And thank God there are those exceptions. But to give your book the best chance, give it the best chance.
So I've got a great last question. Well, this isn't last, actually second to last. Would you recommend finding beta readers before or after hiring an editor?
Before.
Great, thank you. And the final question. What is the number one
final question ever?
Final question ever. No, we'll come back and do it. We'll be back. We'll be back with something at some point. Don't you worry. What is the number one thing you look for in a book, Sally?
A good story. I want that thing that makes me think, oh, just one more, you know, even if I'm working on it as an editor, sometimes somebody will be shouting at me, you know, dinner's ready, and I'll say, yeah, just a minute, you know, just a few more pages, just because I'm loving it. So really, a really gripping story, good characters, few surprises are always good. I love a book that I love to think I did not see that coming. Yeah, you know, that's always good fun. But a book that has got, you know, good pacing, good story, at least one person that you're rooting for, and something that gets you in the feels, really. You want to become emotional.
Gets you in the feels,
emotionally involved.
Right, that's it, Sal. What a great way to finish. What a great question from Michael. Thank you for that, Michael, and what a great answer as well. It's a good story. It's all about a good story, folks.
That's what it's all about.
And this story, or this chapter, this story has come to an end. So after 21 sessions, tonight is the final one. Thank you all so much for joining us. I love spending time, Sal, with you. Always have. But it's our audience that make this so special. We love the interaction. We'll quite often spend time, hours afterwards, going through the chat files. We can see your comments and questions we've missed. And I love the chat that goes on between you all as well. So it does really feel like a sense of community. And we will be back. We will be running other events, I'm sure, at points in the future. We'll keep you posted.
Absolutely. And this is going to sound like self-promotion, which I suppose it is, but I actually don't mean it like this. One of the things I offer is a 1-hour phone call. And you'd be amazed what can get fixed in a 1-hour phone call. If you look on my website, you know, if you don't think you're ready, or you haven't got the money or whatever to really commit to an editor, so much can get sorted out in a 1-hour phone call. So, you know, other people might do that as well. But really, I just want to say what Tom's just said. It's been a fantastic 2 years. I've loved it. And we always say this, but the best bit is the questions. That's what makes this. That's what makes this so special. And we shall miss you. We shall miss you all.
Yeah, we really will. And good luck, everybody out there. You've got this.
And please, you know, when you get your agents and when you get published, let us know. We really want to know. Tell us how you do, or when you self-publish successfully, let us know, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've posted Sally's website a couple of times. I should also post Twitter handles. You can find us at ProWritingAid on Twitter. Sally, SOJ Seaside?
I believe I am.
SOJ Seaside. So I think it is SOJ.
I never know my own Twitter handle. I'm so useless.
Take it, Miss Cat, Tom's cat too. Thank you, Cal Writer. She's gone off to have a sleep on the bed somewhere. Yeah, do keep us informed. Sal's on Twitter daily. I'm on Twitter every day or two. Do keep us informed. Let us know how you're getting on. Keep sending your questions in. Stay in touch. We're part of your community and love being there for you. So, but we're going to end with a big thank you. And we will let you know when we're next going to appear on your screen. So we can't wait to have you join us once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe wherever you are. And thank you once again for your time. Okay, everybody. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.